Hi, thanks for joining me. Cheers. Just having a cup of tea. It's Friday night here in the Philippines, 2 hours out of Manila. I'm Didici and just flew back from Singapore. I must say I travel a lot, but it's really relaxing when you get back, and you can get back to the things that you're really passionate about. And sometimes life takes you away from that, and you've just got to remind yourself that the reason you're here is to live your passion and to fall in love with your life. And astrology is what I love. So I just reached over here and pulled off these two books. It's actually one book in two parts. It's called Prashna Marga. The other name is Prashna Padavi. It's a classic Vedic astrology text which specifically deals with questions that are posed in any given moment. The question may relate to your profession or your health, money, missing people. It even gets down to some very interesting things related to predicting weather, earthquakes, a bit of political astrology. So it's a classic work, and what I find very intriguing in this particular book is the attention to detail on such things as reading the omens, the sort of synchronous things that seem to happen when you're reading for someone, when they come to you, and there's an urgency in the question. What's happening in the background, not just in the heavens. We draw the horoscope, of course, but we also like to take note of what's going on around us, what's going on within us as astrologers. So for those of you that are aspiring astrologers, this particular work is of specific interest to those of you who want to transcend the normal limits of astrology and how astrologers function, and move to the esoteric level, which redefines what the horoscope actually is, to my way of looking at it anyhow. It doesn't only look at the map with the positions of the planets, the aspects, whether it be Western tropical or Vedic Hindu astrology. A lot of astrologers are caught in that paradigm of the horoscope being this magic piece of paper that is telling us where the planets are. The horoscope on paper is only representative really of what's happening, not just in the planetary environment, the stellar environment, but also within the astrologer, within the client. There's a sensitivity and an awareness of the responsiveness of this moment as a fractal. I use that term in the literal sense, that as above, so below. That simply means that this micro environment that we're looking at, and the micro within the micro, is simply a fractal of the whole. The part is in the whole and the whole is in the part. And that means that the astrologer at the time of the question is indeed a horoscope. He is a resonant point in time and space, reflecting and, in a way, I don't like to use the word channeling, but bringing through that fractality, if I could use that word, the fractality of the moment as represented in the planets, being felt in the body of the astrologer, being felt in the sounds in the immediate environment, the colour of the clothing that the client is wearing, what specific touches or gestures are made, what words are uttered out of the mouth of the client, the person seeking the advice of the astrologer. This is called nimittam, or omens, for want of a better English word. I guess another word would be serendipitous signals. It's an interesting concept, but I think that is what this book is trying to get at. And when you start to look through this book, it's quite amazing. I have quite a few of the classic texts. This is one that I really like, and it may sound strange. The technicalities are there in a variety of presentations in many of the different works, but some of them will resonate with you. This is one that resonates with me, Prashnamarga. And the other one that my teacher recommended was the Jataka Parijata, which is a beautiful work too. And when you actually touch some of these books, it's not just a feeling here, it's actually a sensation you get. There is some power, some transmission going on. Very important insights in that specific work. And I did find that with both of these types of work. Sorry, I've digressed. I wanted to talk about how this, as we go to chapter 1, book 1, sorry, and some of the, I think it's easier rather than going through laboriously, and we'll probably go through this book over time. If you want to join me, we can talk about different aspects of it, what astrology comprehends. It goes into very interesting stuff on the qualifications of the astrologer, and that's important too, because although I'm talking about books and reading and technique, it's something my teacher discouraged for many years. It's now 20 years since I've been with him. He's getting old now. He's an Indian master of the Vedic system of astrology, but also some of the other branches of, I guess, esoteric and tantric knowledge. And he's always told me, don't rely wholly and solely on the technique. That's where the initiation comes in. And one of the qualifications of the astrologer is given in this magnificent work is the fact that transmission must occur. To transmit this sort of information, you do need to have received a transmission of sorts. And that is, I suppose, based upon ritual technologies, systems that are designed to impart or awaken different parts of the astrologer, particularly in the area of the mouth. We often hear these other, the main chakras, but these other chakras, and in fact there are, quite a few chakras below the spine, going down into the big toe, which is clinically where the Kundalini or the spiritual charge or transmission comes from. It's called Kalagni Rudra chakra, the lower chakras. But again, I digress. The chakra here in the tongue, there are minor chakras here. And for example, the initiation takes place with the mantras or the repetitive sound vibrations of Tara, which is the second object of transcendental knowledge, or what's called Dasa Mahavidya, the knowledge of the 10 objects. And these objects, like space, time, are personified in this system. So what the book is talking about is the need for the astrologer. The genuine astrologer who's able to communicate what and decipher what the environment, the greater environment, the lesser environment, the immediate biological environment, the relationship of the astrologer to the client. Unless he's been initiated into this, all he'll have is the technology. He won't have that deep and spontaneous intuition. And so the book goes into that initiatory process, talking about how the astrologer should have that sort of transmission himself before he can transmit the knowledge and interpret some of these symbols that are part of the zodiac. It goes into what's called different kinds of Ganita, or the different branches of astrology. I opened the talk by talking a little bit about that. There's the study of astrology, then he speaks about some of the ancient masters, in this case Varaha Mihira, who is considered the father of Vedic astrology, along with the other great sage and master Parasara. Here it talks about the role of horoscopy, and then it, in a way, differentiates. There are different branches of astrology, and for example, I find it interesting in Vedic astrology. Generally, there are very special aspects of the planets which are a little different. There's still aspects that are used in Western astrology, but different planets are assigned those unique aspects. So, for example, the square is assigned to Mars. There's also a quincunx, or what we call a 150-degree in conjunction that particular planet has unique to itself. Saturn has that sextile and the reverse square, which is interesting. And then Jupiter has that triangular aspect, the 120-degree aspect, which is considered quite beneficial. So, when we look at the natal horoscopy, we see that when we move to this branch, which is called Prashna or horary astrology, that we even include some of the Western aspects which were actually borrowed from some of the earlier systems, such as this, which is like the annual return astrology. This is called Tajika astrology. Prashna, which is horary. These two systems use these sextile aspects, these typical Western aspects, but usually only in predicting for a question that's been given at the moment. So it goes into the differences there and how horary astrology uses these specific aspects to give answers to the questions. Another branch here that's given is one called Muhurta or electional astrology. This is really important too. And when you start to
MP4
research, for example, the format, the phases of the moon, and how
what quality we get.
Just as a farmer
whether we
plants
can get
seed
onto
on
the
new
Corel
moon,
draw
he's
system
going to get a much better
straight
result
off the
than
SD card.
if he waits till the new moon, the full moon passes. Likewise, the human body and the nails and the hair. Not that I have much hair, but there's an electrical discharge. Cutting the nails, shaving, cutting your hair, that sort of thing, on the wrong lunar dates is an example of not just electional or electional astrology or muhurta, but a deep insight into how the concern for the person and the particular way a specific event or function can impact upon you. And again, people laugh at this, but you can do your own experiments on that. In fact, if you wait till the moon is in its waning phase, so there's not that huge sort of pull, that subtle drag on the energy, then you can minimize the amount of that electrical discharge. And in the long term, that's going to be really, really good for your health. So, it's really novel sorts of insights that we get. I mean, look at the number of chapters in this. This is just the first. Well, actually, it's not the first. I think it's both books. But look, there's a lot of information in this book. It gets into some very, very novel ideas. I'm jumping ahead here. It goes through such things as the wow, these are heavy things. I don't want to scare you. Timing of death, those intervals in life which are difficult. That we can look at the cycles. We can take those repetitive cycles. The repetitive cycles of the sun are called the annual or solar return. Most of us have heard of the Saturn return, but Jupiter has a return too. That's a 12-year cycle. There are different returns for different planets. Uranus, 84-year cycle, which is approximately the span of life of a man. And within those cycles, there are like modulations. So you've got these longer cycles of the outer planets. The really, really outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, are considered more generational influences. But if we move further in, we see Saturn, 29.5-year cycle, Jupiter, 12-year cycle. These cycles we can measure, and we can, to a large extent, replicate those cycles. So it talks about these cycles in different intervals, and by observation we can see when those intervals are going to be good, when they're going to be bad. The longer intervals, such as the Saturn cycles, in specific parts of the horoscope, especially the 4th, the 7th, 8th, and 10th positions aren't considered great in the transit of Saturn. And then there's the very special 7.5-year cycle that many Indians, if they're watching this, will know about, called the Sadhe Sati. And if you observe that, I'm going through that very cycle now, and it's very hard not to see the truth in that when you apply that to your own life and observe your own life, become aware of it, and then just connect it through that synchronicity and serendipity to these cycles. You can do that on a monthly basis with the lunar returns, eclipses, so on and so forth, and see for yourself. Plot your own cycle. You don't need an astrologer to do that. And this book gets into how to do that, how to look at the larger periods of life. Getting onto some better, here's an interesting one, and I've verified this many times. The sort of patient or the client that is actually psychologically deranged, lunacy. There are patterns for that. One that springs to mind is the weak moon associated with Saturn in the 12th house. That on a few occasions I've been able to verify as something that affects the mental balance of a person. I have many horoscopes in my collection on suicides, the manner in which suicide takes place, and again we can see patterns. Serial killers, I'm doing studies on that, where we can see especially the patterns of Mars and Saturn violence. But how do we distinguish that from, say, great fighters? Muhammad Ali has Mars and Saturn together. How do we distinguish that from, someone like Mussolini or Hitler, mass murderers? Why did this particular person channel that Mars and Saturn energy into a professional avenue and the others went completely crazy? These are all the fascinating aspects of astrology. How to tell whether a person is a lunatic. Very useful in this day and age, especially with the people you work with. Sometimes you just don't know. How to tell whether a person is a lunatic. Very useful in this day and age, especially with the people you work with. Sometimes you just don't know. Anyhow, look, without labouring the point, I quite like this whole concept of the omens, the sound of a crow, or a bolt of lightning, just as the client's asking a question about is this or that going to happen? Will the relationship be good? Bang, thunder and lightning. Yeah, then of course you marry that fractal up with this fractal called the horoscope you're looking at to the fractal, which is the larger environment. And then if there's a synchronicity in your intuition and what you see there with all of these, the omen that's occurring at the time is just going to substantiate what you're seeing there. Sometimes it's quite miraculous. The other thing I see in many horoscopes, which is why I say to astrologers, you should always prepare both the natal horoscope and also the horoscope for the time of question. What's amazing is the synchronicity, you call it the no coincidence. Positions of planets at the time of a question, 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, and then looking at the positions of the planets at the time of birth, the similarity, and in particular the moon's position I've found. The moon is never, in my case, from my observation, in exactly the same position as the birth moon. It'll be maybe 10 or 15 degrees away, but it will usually be in the same sign or in the triangular positions to the lunar position. The ascendant at the time the person has come for the question will also mimic the ascendant at the time of birth, or the lunar position at the time of birth, or one of the triangular positions at the time of birth. Some of the planets or pairs or triplicates of planets will be in the same directions of the zodiac, and that's such an encouragement when you see that, and it sort of starts to vindicate astrology a little. It was funny, tonight I got a call from a very good friend of mine. We've been friends for years. We did music together when I was studying music, and it's the classic case of the believer versus the skeptic, the atheist. But it was amazing. We've had years and years of very interesting discussion. I've got a lot of respect for him. He's got an incredible mind, and I'm sure he respects me. But tonight he had a discussion with me, and he was just saying, wow, I've just read this interesting article from New York, and it looks like there's some weight or evidence now emerging for the case that the personality of human beings is seasonal. In other words, it has to do with the different seasons in the northern and southern hemisphere. And as he said that, I said, well, I've been saying this to you for years, Rowan, and it's interesting that the seasons, and he was talking about weather changes and famines and that type of thing, and I was saying to him, well, these are very easily replicable and forecastable, easily forecast through the this what we call the cyclic index of the sun, the sunspot index. What's called maxima and minima, different periods. And those maxima and minima seem to loosely follow an 11.66 year cycle, which is, again, roughly about the 12-year cycle of Jupiter. So, when you look at the movement of Jupiter, if you're wanting, for example, to predict the stock market trends, commodities, indices, we look at that. We look at the also the ingresses of the sun into the different cardinal points of the horoscope, and you can see what's happening there. Big revolutions take place in these different cycles of the sunspot activity, but they're also influenced gravitationally by planets like Jupiter and Saturn, and different angular positions of those planets at in different phase angles and times. So it was quite comforting to get that information from him, and to see that he at least he's been a little open-minded about that. And there is a lot of data now supporting this. I have another client, he's a doctor in Brisbane, haven't spoken to him for years, but he was quite interested in the increased rate of heart attack throughout the eclipse cycles, and he's doing some research. He's doing his doctorate in medicine and some sort of genetic sort of work. So it's interesting when you look at these books and then you see where science is going now. We're starting to see more and more of the correlations, and just getting back to, I guess, broadly to a theme of this talk. It would have to be with the synchronicity of things. And I'd put it to you that apart from just the synchronicity of the omens or those signals, as I call them, synchronous signals, we should also look at the synchronicity of certain events in the flow of our lives. As I'm discovering now, as you go through life, there are things that happen, but if you are aware and alert enough, you can actually see that there's such purpose in all of that, as hard as it is. If you're open and receptive and prepared to ride that wave, and in that spirit of adventure, just see where that's going to take you. And in a way, that's why I don't like to look too much at my own horoscope. I like to be pleasantly surprised too, which is why some people don't like to look at astrology, and that's okay too. But I guess both result in a similar sort of thing if you're aware enough. I guess a healthy respect for the good, the bad, and the ugly in life, seeing them in the context of a larger sort of pattern, a larger fractal, like a morphing or sort of continual happening. And with that attitude, then you can see into this moment uncluttered by the filtering mind. And that too is one of the key ingredients or key requisites of an astrologer, having that filter turn off. That's a very big point too in that process of initiation I was talking about. The repetitive mantras, the meditative state is in a way designed to evaporate that filtering process, which is based upon conditioning. Intuition is really an immediacy of knowing, of tapping into this specific moment, raw, unfiltered, and just seeing things as they are. When you can do that, then, as these books also say, and some of the yoga texts relating to absorption and inner knowledge, that the awareness of the object, the complete connectivity with the object without any mind, in a way, conscious mind I'm talking about, processing mind, is what gives that intuitive insight. So it's a little hard to describe. I guess what I'm trying to say is when a person comes to you as a client, you as an astrologer need to, it's hard, switching off that process of judgment is not an easy thing. And but once you can do that, that's, and that I think is the practice for the astrologer. That I think is what these sort of books in their essence are trying to say. Yes, they're giving you all the verbal technique, but the deeper implication is that that intuitive process has to be sparked by that transmission, by the adept, someone who has that innate knowledge and is capable of transmitting it to you. When that happens, that filtration, that judgment, that not just of others, but of your own life, of your own circumstance, your own situation, you do tend to judge that, and that's all based upon the the principle of fear, fear and love, attraction, repulsion. So once that's switched off, the core essence of the astrologer can start to function. The intuitive process can start to blossom, and that is independent of any technique you've learned, any books, any specific laws and regulations of any system of astrology. The astrologer then, through what's called VAC, or the activation of these specific nerves in the mouth and the tongue, give a direct intuitive perception of the situation, and the link there is quite palpable between the astrologer, the self of the astrologer, and the planetary environment and the omens. So that is how really the astrologer should work. That is how I try to work anyhow. And I'd welcome any of you to join me in a session if you'd like to have a look at what your horoscope has to say, what that synchronicity is right now, what that cycle is that you're going through. Yes, we can look at the day-to-day affairs of your life, but we can also look at the deeper significance of why you're here, the karmic patterns, the genetic patterns that are embedded there, and how to, in a way, reprogram them through these different ritual technologies. I'm here. You can click on that button there if you'd like to make direct contact with me. There's no reason why you can't talk to me here through my email. Just drop me a line, tell me what's on your mind, what you're thinking about, and I'll get back to you and we can have a chat about things. You can go to the website if you like, astrology.com.au. Thanks for joining me and being patient. I know this was a little drawn out, but I've had fun doing it. I hope you've had just as much fun. See you soon. Bye-bye now.